Amber's capabilities are pretty weak on paper. Low damage, a lackluster taunt, and a short burst duration. Her stats are fairly low, and she gets outclassed by her pyro counterparts. And this is coming from someone who triple crowned her. In most people's eyes, she is without a doubt one of the worst characters in the game. Apart from her basic kit, she also has a ton of practical issues that hinder her performance. Her burst is kinda weird, and this might be the most frustrating ability to use ever. A character's elemental skill has a couple of uses. It might be the entire reason why they're used, or it might enhance their role on the team, or it might just be a comfortable way to get energy. At C0, Baron Bunny doesn't fit into any of these. To describe just how infuriating Baron Bunny is to use, I'm gonna have to bring out a simple chart. Taunts that can move, taunts that can't move, taunts that generate energy on cast, and taunts that generate energy on explosion. And that's the problem. Baron Bunny only generates energy after dealing damage, but since enemies can just knock it away, which they will, because, it's a taunt, it just straight up will not generate energy. But I mean, at least it's an explosion, right? So surely that hitbox is pretty big.
It's getting late. Should I light a torch?
This page on the wiki tells us the radius of AoE attacks. Chongyun's skill has a radius of 8, Bennett's burst has a radius of 6, and Amber's skill has a radius of 3. And while half the radius of Bennett's burst doesn't sound that bad, that does not translate to half the size. The area of a circle is given by A equals pi r squared, so by cutting the radius in half, Amber's skill is actually 4 times smaller than Bennett's burst. And that is pretty small. Sometimes the enemy can just be waiting to attack and Baron Bunny won't be able to hit them. Her C2 kinda helps with this, but you have to fully charge an arrow and hit specifically its feet. So if Baron Bunny is partially underwater, you won't be able to detonate it. Her burst is more consistent than her skill, but it's not perfect either. The amount of arrows that hit an enemy are, in practice, random. And this is pretty important, since it means she'll either trigger 3 or 4 elemental reactions per burst, which can be a significant variance in her damage. So what are her redeeming factors? None. That are intended. You might already be familiar with what a Dragonstrike is, but if you don't, I'll run you through it real quick. When you hit an enemy, there's a small bit of hit lag. During this moment, you can dash jump, which for some reason gives you enough height to perform a plunge attack. The timing is pretty strict, but the longer the hit lag and the more movement speed you have, the easier the timing is. For some strange reason, Baron Bunny has an active hitbox that you can hit, even though you won't deal any damage. Plunge attacks have slightly more range than normal attacks, so if you're slightly too far away, hitting Baron Bunny instead of the enemy will still let you trigger a Dragonstrike. If you're close enough to the enemy to hit them, hitting Baron Bunny will still increase the window for you to trigger a Dragonstrike. Since movement speed also increases the timing for a Dragonstrike, C6 Amber is actually a very good support for Dragonstrike shenanigans. And you would think that's where the jank with Baron Bunny ends, but this puppet is weird even before it comes out. As you may know, some artifact sets and domain effects trigger upon casting an elemental skill. These are usually balanced since you can only cast a certain amount of elemental skills since they're automatically put on a timer. Amber can completely ignore this. You can jump and dash cancel Baron Bunny, which counts as using an elemental skill without putting it on cooldown. The timing for this is strict but humanly possible, letting her use 4-piece Crimson at C0. Is this practical? Honestly, yeah. Even if you're not using Crimson, animation cancelling can still shave some seconds in content like Abyss, as shown by Furu, who is way better than me. You want to know what isn't humanly possible though? This is a frame-perfect technique. You might notice that this isn't actually my clip, and that's because I can't do it. It's so impossibly difficult that I challenge you to try and do it yourself. You want to know how big of a window you have to do this? That fast. If you're watching this video on 30 FPS, you might not have even seen anything. The trick here is using aim shot mode. Normally, after firing an arrow, the game stops you from leaving aim shot mode for a little bit. But by leaving aim shot mode on the same frame as you fire your arrow, the game fires it but thinks that you didn't fire an arrow since you left aim shot mode. Luckily for us, there is a Walmart version of this tech that is considerably easier but does less damage. By holding down normal attack, we can fire an arrow as soon as we enter aim shot mode. Which kicks us out of aim shot mode, allowing us to repeat it. This technically works on almost all bow characters, but in reality it's only practical on Amber. To explain why, we gotta dive into the realm of poise damage. I am by no means an expert on the whole poise system, but I think I know enough to give a brief overview. Poise is basically just stagger. There's actually an entire local legend based on this hidden mechanic. Most enemies have a hidden poise health bar, and every attack in the game does a hidden amount of poise damage. Once that hidden health bar is depleted, the enemy will be considered staggered and vulnerable. From here, each attack in the game has a hidden impulse value. An attack with an impulse value of 1 does a slight stagger, like Barbara's first 3 auto attacks. An attack with a higher impulse value, like Jean's skill, sends them completely airborne. So why is this important? Well, only 2 of the 5 weapon types can reliably hit enemies when they're airborne. Of these 2, bow characters do way more poise damage with the rapid fire tech I talked about earlier. A charged shot also has a high enough impulse value to knock enemies up into the air. This, combined with the insane attack speed, lets you juggle enemies while airborne, letting them take fall damage. Fall damage in Genshin deals percentage-based damage to the enemy, meaning if the enemy has 100 or 10 million HP, fall damage will always deal the same percent damage, whether that be 10 damage or 1 million. If you're good enough so that Amber can juggle enemies into the air, you can do an insane amount of fall damage. While other characters like Jean can do the same thing, Amber's way of triggering fall damage does not rely on cooldowns, meaning that the only limiting factor is you. Oh yeah, you can technically do this on all bow characters, but Amber's the best one thanks to her C1. If you want to see just how strong this is against the right enemy, I highly recommend you to go check out Nitro Tom, the actual GOAT of juggling. Seriously, he can defeat some local legends with solo Amber faster than some of my strongest teams. So yeah, is Amber a good character? Well, because of her shortcomings, no. I still think she is objectively bad. Of course you can make her work like Furu, but she isn't gonna be comparable to someone like Arlecchino. But with all of her hidden tech, I'll give her the title of Genshin's strongest bad character.